waiting, I could tell you guys. Okay. Now, while we're waiting, I'll tell you guys a little bit about Fooditude, which is Holistic Health Alliance's other youth-led, I guess, initiative right now. Um, Everyone's here for a TMHI meeting, teen mental health, but Fooditude is actually about the diets that kids have so that it educates kids and the youth to start early with a healthy diet because while we're younger, we have a stronger metabolism. It's easier to build bad habits and live with them. However, once you get older, it's harder to break those bad habits, and those bad habits affect you a lot worse. So we want to promote eating healthy young and starting out and building good habits and a good relationship with food. So we share Instagram posts just like TMHI. We host events. We're gonna have a Jeopardy later this year. Everyone keep an eye out for that. And you know, I'm the vice president. Arav is here. He's the president. He can tell you a little more if I forget anything. But Fooditude is really good. It's really fun. If there's any students here listening, you guys can ask us about it, and we can maybe let you join and give you some more information there. But yeah, that's all I've got for now.
Agni, we are waiting for your signal. Whenever I can see Elizabeth has joined. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Do we have Dr. Keshavan?
I don't think we have Dr. Keshavan yet. I think I'll wait a couple more minutes. I sent him the code, so he should be able to join momentarily.
Would you like to call him? Just call and ask if there's, because we are a little over the start time right now.
Yeah, I can call him.
Thank you all for your patience. So, if there are any youth listening to this recording even later on, please do consider joining the Youth Brigade. It's free to join. And parents, if you're listening in and if you have a youth at home, in your family, in your friends, consider having them join. It's a very important way to engage volunteer hours. Every high schooler is looking for volunteer hours. This is a very meaningful way to get some volunteer hours while getting educated, informed, and empowered in very basic things around well-being, which are to do with food awareness and mental health awareness. Um, uh, Arav or Amuk, somebody is going to share the link to join. Can you do that now as well as we are talking? Just share it from the website. Thank you. Thank you so much. So just look for the Youth Brigade button in the chat. There is a link. Click on that and you will find Join Youth Brigade. And you can read up on the projects. The amazing thing is that both the projects are led by youth and for youth. Even today's panel is put together by our wonderful teen mental health youth. And it's a very timely and relevant topic, as you all know. And we have all the subject matter experts. So we are waiting just for one more subject matter expert to join, and then we will get started. And you will let us know, Wagni, when he has joined. She's trying to contact him. Looks like. We'll wait just a couple minutes, otherwise we will get started. We will start the questions with the rest of the panelists. So just another minute or so. Thank you so much. I'm not a youth, you can see. I'm definitely not part of the youth brigade, but I'll just in a minute, I'll introduce myself. Just very happy to be here amongst all the youth. Pagmi, shall we get started?
Yes, I think this is a good time to get started. So, greetings everyone. I am Vagmi and I'm a junior at Hopkinton High School. And so, on the behalf of the Holistic Health Alliance Youth Brigade's Teen Mental Health Initiative project, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. To begin with, I'm going to invite the founder and president of Holistic Health Alliance, Dr. Pratibha Shah, to say a few words.
Thank you, Vatmi. And I'm not going to take much time at all. I just want to introduce the parent organization. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are nationally launched. We have practitioner members from all over the US, and our youth members are also from different states. Um, One of the very close to my heart projects is the Teen Mental Health Initiative. And I'm so glad that this panel has been put together in this Mental Health Awareness Month. Um, Please check out our website, is all I'm going to say. We are all about educating and empowering the community about non-pharmaceutical ways of healing, of which there is less awareness. And through our youth project, we are trying to engage all of our youth in this country, because when they are engaged, they are getting informed themselves, getting empowered themselves. And through their social media posts and programs and events like such as what we are holding today, they are able to disseminate this information among the public as well, especially regarding today's topic. It's a very relevant, timely topic because there is abysmally low awareness about mental health issues, not just among the teen, but among the adults as well. And we are hoping that with many such events, we will start to contribute to building that awareness and also to break down some of the myths and remove the stigma or mitigate the stigma around these topics. So with that, I pass on the platform again to Vatmi, who is our president-elect for Mental Health Initiative under our Youth Brigade. Again, it's free to join the Youth Brigade, and you can see these are dynamic group of youth who are doing amazing. They are maintaining the website, the social media platforms, and putting out really informative posts out there on social media. You can find by the same names, Teen Mental Health Initiative and Fooditude. So with that, over to you, Robbie.
Thank you. I once again welcome you all to our Mind Matters virtual mental health panel hosted by the WHA-Teen Mental Health Initiative. We're so grateful to have you join us today as we raise awareness about mental health and work to break the stigma that often prevents teens from seeking the help they need. This event takes place during Mental Health Awareness Month, as Pratibha Shah mentioned, a time dedicated to recognizing the importance of emotional well-being and advocating for accessible support. At Teen Mental Health Initiative, we believe that teen mental health deserves to be prioritized, discussed openly, and supported with care and compassion. Today's panel is for anyone who wants to learn more, gain valuable resources, and become part of a movement that values vulnerability and strength in equal measure. We are honored to welcome our guest speakers, Dr. Keshavan and Dr. Chandra from Harvard Medical School, Ms. Frias, a counselor at Westboro High School, and Ms. Elyzabeth Frontaan from the Massachusetts Behavioral Health Helpline. Each one of them brings a wealth of experience and insight to this important conversation, and we're so excited to learn from them and grow together as a community. I will now have our fellow volunteers introduce themselves as well as the speakers today, starting off with Arav.
Hello, everyone. My name is Arav. I'm a rising senior, and I live in Chicago, Illinois. And I'm here to introduce Dr. Rohit Chandra. Dr. Chandra is a child and adolescent psychologist at MGH Chelsea, president of the Indo-American Psychiatric Association in New England, and teaches a monthly exam review session to second-year Harvard medical students.
Arav, you're breaking up.
Development of Asian Americans, differences, and intergenerational conflicts. Hello, is it better now?
Yeah, can you repeat the introduction right from the start?
Sorry about that. Okay, so my name is Ari Budadev. I'm a rising senior, and I live in Chicago area in Illinois. And I'm introducing Dr. Rohit Chandra. Dr. Chandra is a child and adolescent psychiatrist at MGH Chelsea. He's the president of the Indo-American Psychiatric Association in New England and teaches a monthly exam review session to second-year Harvard medical students. He's interested in the cultural identity development of Asian Americans, values differences and intergenerational conflict within Asian American families, and the impact of academic pressure on student mental health. He has published on the influences and values of the culture on mental health of Asian Indians in America.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yep.
Next up, we have Rhea, and she will be introducing Sarah Frias from Westboro High School.
Hi, I'm Rhea, and I'm going to be a rising junior in Westboro High School. Sarah Frias is a school psychologist who supports teens as they navigate academic, social, and emotional challenges. She is passionate about reducing the stigma surrounding mental health and creating spaces where students feel safe, heard, and empowered to ask for help and advocate for themselves. Through her work, she sees firsthand how open conversations and early support can impact young students' lives, and she is thrilled to be a part of this important discussion.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Rhea, for the warm welcome.
Thank you. Next up, we have Amog introducing Dr. Keshavan, who will be here shortly.
Yep.
Shall we go ahead and introduce Elizabeth meantime? And Vagmi,
Yes.
can you try calling him again?
Yeah, I just emailed him and called him.
I did. I emailed too, but I think we need to call him now.
Yes.
And who's the next?
Me.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Drishti. I'm a sophomore at Westboro High School, and I'll be introducing Elizabeth Frontaan. Elizabeth Frontaan is a native New Yorker and a lifelong learner. She's a community relations representative for the Massachusetts Behavior Helpline for the Carillon Behavior Health Company. Elizabeth holds a Bachelor of Science in Public Health from Worcester State University. She has a strong dedication to behavioral health advocacy for the inclusion of autistic children, maternal health, and the empowerment of survivors of domestic violence. She focuses on sharing her lived experiences to inspire others to raise above life's challenges and find the help that they need.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me.
And lastly, we can introduce Dr. Keshavan. Amog, on to you.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Amog. I'm the Vice President of Fooditude and a TMHI member. I'm a rising junior, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Keshavan. He is a Stanley Cobb Professor and the Academic Head of Psychiatry at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center at Harvard Medical School. And he is also a senior psychiatrist at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center in Boston, Massachusetts. Dr. Keshavan is closely involved in research in neurobiology of psychosis, especially as it pertains to first episode psychotic disorders. In particular, his focus is on the neurodevelopmental basis of schizophrenia, neuroimaging, and early intervention. His research has resulted in over 900 publications to date, including 5 books. Dr. Keshavan is a former editor-in-chief of the Elsevier journals and the Asian Journal of Psychiatry and Schizophrenia Research. He has an active clinical practice at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center. And he'll be here shortly.
We can get started. So let's start with the first question.
Yep. So to start, we would like to get into the questions and make sure your answers around 2 to 3 minutes long, as we want to get to all the questions today. We have Rohan here to keep track of time. Welcome, Dr. Keshavan. Nice to see you.
My apologies for
All good. There was a confusion with the Zoom link. We apologize for that. We have Rohan here to keep track of time. Moreover, a general housekeeping reminder for the audience to please keep your mics muted, and we can get into getting to know our wonderful speakers today. So to start, I would like to address a question for all of our speakers today. How do you describe mental health stigma? I would like to invite Dr. Chandra to speak first on how he would like to describe mental health stigma.
Mhm. Am I muted or am I okay?
You're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So stigma, I mean, essentially is some sort of negative mark. So it's defined as a set of negative and unfair beliefs that a society or group of people have about something, a mark of shame or discredit. I would say that for adolescents, who are struggling with mental illness, the kinds of stigma they may face, parents may feel like they're weak. They have it because they're weak. They have it because they have not tried hard enough and are not succeeding academically. That's why they're struggling. Parents may really just kind of blame them essentially for what they have, not recognizing that this is an illness. It's, these are common in the US. They may not have been common in people's home countries, but they're common here. And, that it's important, to get treatment. But in general, I think there's a lot of shame because there's a question, could it be my parenting that contributed? But there's certain sets of beliefs, which we can talk more about. I don't want to take everyone's answer, but essentially there may be sets of beliefs that people hold about those with mental illness that may factor into, that there may be barriers to help seeking and may also make the person who's struggling feel even worse about themselves. Thanks.
Thank you for your answer. Next up, I would like to invite Ms. Sarah Frias to define stigma.
Sure. So not too much more to add, but mental health stigma to me is the idea that perpetuates this idea that teens shouldn't seek help or talk openly about their mental health struggles. And this can be related to an array of reasons. So it could be social stigma. It could be like this fear of being judged or this idea that we need to uphold this perfect image for everyone to see. It could be self-stigma. It could be that we're putting this pressure on ourselves. We might feel weak to admit that we're struggling through something. It could be the environment that we're in. So it could be our family, our cultural beliefs, or even the school climate that we're in that perpetuates this idea that we can't talk openly about mental health.
Yes, I think this is especially relevant for teens, especially at this time. Be very stressful and do such feelings. Next up, I would like to have Dr. Keshavan define his version of stigma.
Thank you. I think already what Dr. Chandra and Ms. Frias has described is pretty much what I would say. But I would add that there are different types of stigma. There is what you would call self-stigma, as was mentioned, which refers to people kind of internalizing those negative viewpoints or prejudices leading to low self-esteem and self-worth. And by contrast to that, one would also think about public stigma, which is negative attitudes about a given condition or an attribute that is held in the general population. And there's a third kind of stigma that is to be, thought through, and that is what might be called structural stigma. Like institutional practices that sometimes are held that specifically restrict opportunities for stigmatized groups and so on. So there is personal stigma, there is self-stigma, there is public stigma, and there can be institutionalized stigma.
Thank you, Dr. Keshavan. Lastly, I will have Ms. Elyzabeth Frontaan discuss stigma.
Okay. Oh, there we go. I got a little nervous. Thank you. I just kind of wanted to add, I think everyone already summarized it very well, but I would say that stigma just kind of kills and kind of hurt people because it delays the process of getting help. For me personally, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety when I was 18, but I really didn't seek help until I was 26 and I was in a mental health crisis because I didn't know anyone who had depression and it was taboo to speak about it. Every time I mentioned it to my parents or friends, they didn't know what to say or how to support. So I think as a parent, it's important to not kind of continue that cycle of stigma and like tabooness and just kind of have open conversations about that so that we're not delaying treatment for young people that really need to get treatment. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Next up, I will have Amog introduce our next question directed to all of our speakers today.
If we could all please share a valuable moment in your career that changed significantly and impacted your view on mental health. This time, if we could please start with Miss Elizabeth, and then we'll go backwards and end with Dr. Chandra.
I think for me, the moment was when I decided to get more involved and become an advocate, and realizing that a lot more people around me were struggling with the same thing was kind of like very much like eye-opening. Prior to that, my idea, I don't know if you guys seen this movie, it's called Girl Interrupted. I thought like you'd mentioned you have depression or something and they put you in a life jacket and they throw you away. So to me, that was a very eye-opening moment, just kind of starting to have conversations about mental health and realizing that it was affecting a lot of my friends, a lot of my relatives, a lot of the people that I know. And I think also getting the opportunity to work for the Massachusetts Behavior Helpline and just being able to promote mental health and hearing the stories in the communities of what people are going through and how it's affecting them, and sometimes how it makes them feel to actually go out of their way and access help. Has been like a very much like turning point for me in my life, because it helps me realize that a lot more people are being affected by this, but not enough people are talking about it to get help. Thank you.
Next up, if we could have Mr. Keshavan please share a valuable moment in your career that changed or significantly impacted your view on mental health.
Yeah, so as some of you might know, I'm a psychiatrist. I've been practicing mental health over the last 40 plus years. And I've been very keenly aware of the challenges and problems of stigma since quite early in my career. And one particular um, situation that highlighted the importance of this very early in my career was when I saw this young lady, a teenager, was brought to me with by her parents of Asian origin, and I saw her and reviewed all her history and so forth, and said that the diagnosis might be schizophrenia in your daughter. The parents did not come back for the second visit, and turned out that they just took her back to their country of origin for treatment by some faith healers, stopping the medications that she had been on by her primary care doctor here. And it was quite a sad situation where she relapsed and did not do well at all, and came back with a much more severe illness. And I happened to see her again. And by that time, the parents had understood that this is a serious medical illness. But then what they told me is that, the name schizophrenia really throw us completely off. If you had given a different name for her condition, we might have agreed with the treatment. So it really, impressed upon the fact that we not only have to think about better understanding of these diseases and what causes them and about their treatments, but also we need to have the right kind of names that are not so stigmatizing. Perhaps call them by what exactly they bring, whether it is a particular brain condition that they think might be explaining it, or simply what might be the nature of the problem that they're having, instead of giving a name that has become stigmatized over several decades. And this is not just for schizophrenia, but for many other conditions as well.
Wow. And now, Mrs. Frias, if you could please share just a significant, valuable moment that impacted your view on mental health.
Absolutely. So I am still very early in my career as a school psychologist, but I'm lucky enough to work with high school age students every day. So I don't have a specific moment that I can necessarily pinpoint that has been eye-opening, but I will say day to day in some positive ways, I am regularly blown away by how resilient teenagers are. And then I also am just continuing to see how many students, regardless of their background and where they come from, how many of them are impacted by their mental health, and that it doesn't discriminate based on what you've been through or what you've experienced. Everyone is impacted by mental health struggles, and it's something that is so stigmatized, where we kind of feel like we might have an idea of what a person looks like who struggles with mental health, but there really is no image of that person. It's every person is experiencing something like this at some point in their life. So I can't pinpoint something super specifically at this point, but I will say students are very resilient, and I am happy to see the way things are starting to trend and that conversations like this are starting to happen.
Thank you. And Dr. Chandra, if you have anything.
Sure. I don't have one incident, but I will kind of share that a turning point in my career. This is likewise when I was sort of new. I just finished fellowship. I've been just started in this job at MGH Chelsea, where I work as a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. And it was 2015. There had been a number of suicides in Palo Alto, California, by Asian students. There were a lot of Asian American students at Ivy League colleges who had died. It was a disproportionate amount. And and the phenomenon of sort of Asian Americans feeling a lot of academic pressure and stress and getting depressed, potentially dying by suicide was really a phenomenon. I was working with the MGH, it's called the Center for Cross-Cultural Student Emotional Wellness. It's basically an Asian student mental health center. And we were basically going around publicizing the fact that Asian students, were high achieving often, but also struggling, and the struggles were not being noticed, and that was a real problem. So that I think was a big turning point. I began to write about this and actually published an article in Dr. Keshavan's journal, Asian Journal of Psychiatry at the time. And I think the reason I'm bringing this up, not only my own experience, but it sounds like the founding reason for the Teen Mental Health Initiative was the suicide of a student who Agam Prakash had known in Arizona, Chandler Prep, one of the top public high schools in the country. So that seems like that really drove the founding of this Teen Mental Health Initiative. So I think academic pressure, potential depression, suicidality, completed suicides, these are sort of topics of interest to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Now for the next question, we're gonna have Arav ask.
So now we'll ask one question to each of the panelists specific to their fields. I'll start off with Dr. Rohit Chandra. As per your experience with children's psychiatry, what are some ways that parents can identify that their teens are struggling with their mental health?
Yeah. So parents are often, they're often confused about, when kids are withdrawing, is this normal or not, right? I mean, it's normal for adolescents to separate. Indian Americans, and a lot of Indian Americans on this call, a lot of Indian American parents, they did not go through the same kind of individuation in India. They didn't really separate from their families of origin. They kind of, they didn't really, they were just kind of part of the family. They just kind of grew older. Here, separation is expected and is sort of an American value in a sense. So when kids separate and they're just like, Mom, leave me alone. I'm kind of doing my own thing. Like, or I'm talking to my friends. I want to talk to you. Parents get worried and they say, is this normal? It is. The separation part is normal. Obviously, maybe being on one's phone too much isn't great, not great for mental health. But I think the biggest point I want to make is that parents have a kind of a decent sense that the kid is struggling if they get feedback from people in that child's network that the child is struggling. I mean, if the child himself says something, themselves, if teachers say something, if peers say something, and generally there's a change in functioning, right? So one of the definitions of mental health disorder is that you have to have a change in functioning, social, occupational, although they're not working, social, academic functioning. So if there's a change in functioning, it's going to show up somewhere. Teachers may be worried, peers may be worried, friends may be worried. the child himself, herself, themselves may be worried. So if parents are not sure, they can kind of maybe ask people in the network or just really listen to feedback from the network. But yeah, because there are lots of signs, there are lots of behaviors in adolescence which may overlap with depression and anxiety. So I don't want people to be like, my child is doing that. They're depressed. I heard from this doctor on a Zoom call that you're doing this, so you're depressed, or you're doing this, so you're anxious. So I don't want to state like the following, are symptoms that you should watch out for. But really just, be aware. Be aware if if you've noticed worsening in functioning and you're getting feedback from the people that your child knows. I think that's important. And listen to your child too.
My next question is specifically directed to Mrs. Frias. First of all, thank you, Mr. Chandra, for your answer. I think this is so valuable for all adults and parents seeking to help out their children and always watching out for them as we do. And so for Ms. Frias, as a school counselor, what trends have you noticed in the past few years regarding the mental health of students, and how can we help reduce school-related stress?
So I think we see a lot of trends, some positive and some negative. So thinking about the high school that I work in, there's a lot of conversation right now happening around mental health, as well as increased access to mental health within a school setting, which is awesome. We're also seeing schools implement things like regular mental health screeners to ensure that we're identifying students who might be struggling. But we're also seeing some less positive trends. So we're seeing, as Dr. Chandra talked about, like an increase in screen time and social media use. So students actively accessing these things, which are great in many ways, but we know that screen time has such a negative effect on our mental health. And we also see the impact of social media, which in some ways is positive, right? We see this increased conversation around mental health, but then we also see this inflated image of perfection that just isn't realistic, and students are holding themselves to a standard that likely isn't attainable. When we think of our own social media usage, we only post the positive things, we don't post the negative things, and that affects students regularly when they're accessing these websites. And then I think another big thing is academic pressure and just the overexertion of students, right? They want to be heavily involved. They want to be in these high level classes, which is awesome in so many ways, but it adds a lot of pressure to students' everyday lives. So I think finding a balance with these things are super important, right? We want to challenge ourselves. We want to access social media because it is fun. It is a great way to connect, but we also need to set boundaries. So in terms of helping reduce school-related stress, I would say be mindful about yourself. If you're a parent, be mindful about your own child when they're registering for classes for the next year, as great as it sounds to have them involved in all AP and honors classes. Maybe sit with them and think about what's realistic and what's going to be attainable for them so that they can also do things that feel good to them, whether that's like taking a walk after school, spending time with friends, doing things that really make them feel good that maybe aren't school related. So I think really just thinking about day-to-day well-being is important. And those are the things that quickly go out the window when we're prioritizing having perfect grades and being super involved and wanting to be on our phones all the time. Like, we really need to prioritize just our day-to-day well-being. So I think that's really most important in reducing that stress.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much for your response, Ms. Frias. I think that you have really good advice for keeping a balance between both. For Dr. Keshavan, as you have an extensive experience in psychiatry, how can childhood trauma and or experiences impact your mental health as an adult?
Yeah, that's a very important question. We have been involved in some research over the last several years of about what are the various causes for serious mental illness as they emerge during teenage years. As people might be aware, over 75% of all serious mental illnesses begin before age 25, and over 50% of serious mental illnesses begin before age 18. So a lot of mental illnesses begin, in teenage years. And then the question is, what are the factors that increase the likelihood of a kid developing a emotional or serious mental problem? We actually looked at various environmental and genetic risk factors. What is important to know is that one of the strongest risk factors is actually exposure to childhood trauma. And, abuse, neglect, physical as well as psychological, are strong factors that increase the likelihood of a broad range of emotional problems, including anxiety, depression, substance abuse, psychosis, and other conditions. So the important thing also to keep in mind is that a number of them are kind of accumulative over the course of time. One leads to the other. A kid who begins to have anxiety will begin to have a higher risk of depression and substance abuse. And as they accumulate, that increases the risk for a more serious mental illness like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia down the road and so on. So to that extent, many of these may be preventable by early intervention. So that's something important too. And also, considering how one could mitigate those kinds of risk factors by building resilience in these kids would become very, very important as well.
Thank you, Dr. Keshavan, for your response. For Ms. Frontaan, as Massachusetts Behavioral Health Helpline works with a variety of communities, how does stigma vary across different cultures or communities?
Thank you for the question. I mean, we definitely see like a lot of differences. When I first started the work with the behavior helpline, I wasn't sure how it was going to be received or how much, the condition was going to impact the community and how much it was going to be welcome. But while I cover central Massachusetts and my colleagues who cover the whole state, we realized that this is really like a statewide issue. And we have been very happy with the outpouring support, from different organizations and schools who understand the need for mental health and that are willing to collaborate with us so that we can do presentations and tablings and bring various resources, to different kind of populations so that they're able to be supported. And again, we kind of learn as we do the work and we realize which populations need more work and support. So it's definitely like an ongoing practice. And we're learning as we go. And the whole point is to take the information and the data that we see in the behavior helpline, like say Middlesex or certain communities, and see how we can support them further and provide additional resources.
Thank you for your responses, everyone. I actually had a follow-up question, and I'm sure a lot of my fellow volunteers had follow-up questions. Again, thank you so much for your responses, and I loved how detailed, and I love how we are able to get such a variety of perspectives from you all. So my question is for Ms. Frias. I was actually wondering if COVID had an impact on teens' mental health. Me personally, I remember spending a lot of time as a middle schooler in my house just on my phone, and I think that this had a greater impact on me as a high schooler, as sometimes I find myself more addicted to my phone, checking social media too much, which I think is a result of all the time that I spent on social media as a middle schooler. I was wondering what your thoughts are on this topic.
I think that's a great question. And I think you kind of nailed it, even with what you added. Like I mentioned, I'm very new to the field. So this is my first year as a school psychologist working in high schools. I've done 2 years of clinical internships and some practicum experience. So I was able to see some of the impact of COVID. But I agree with you entirely. I think this seclusion that we all were able to experience during COVID became very comfortable. And then the idea of students being by themselves for a year and a half, 2 years to now moving into, nope, you're going back to school, you're going to be with people all day. It was hard. And I think people are still adjusting to that change. And I totally agree with you in terms of increased cell phone use from that time. I think TikTok blew up a lot during COVID and has certainly become an addiction for a lot of teens and young adults. So I think we're slowly coming out of that kind of effect and starting to recover, but I think the repercussions are still there for sure.
Yes, I agree. Definitely just like holding up in my room all the time on my phone did not have a good effect on me, and I'm sure a lot of teens agree with that statement. Um, I was wondering if any of my fellow volunteers had any questions, and then we can open it up to our audience for Q&A.
I actually
Okay,
had
Arv, you go.
forgot. Okay. So when we were speaking about technology and like information online, how would you guys suggest going about like seeing what information online is reliable versus unreliable?
So this is just a quick answer off the top of my head. I mean, I use Common Sense Media. It's James Steyer's website, and it's very good about, I mean, this may not be exactly what you're asking, but this looks at sort of useful, like what's useful, what's not, what is troublesome for kids of different ages, what's not. But I'm not sure if you're referring more to like mental health apps or what I just want to make sure I know what you're asking.
I was talking more about information that's spread through social
Oh,
media online.
oh, I see. Like, how do you vet that information?
How do you just like know which information is correct versus which is a little bit more misleading?
Okay. Well, maybe I'll
Misinformation about
give up the
mental
floor to
health.
someone who can answer that better. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I can add is go to websites that are well established and are kind of organizations that have been well known in the field. For example, when it comes to psychiatric illness, going into the National Institutes of Health website would be, they're fairly objective. And likewise, American Psychological Association and American Psychiatric Association, they put nice, researched summaries of various topics. Similarly, the SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, which is another federal agency, they have very good information. But the less well-known sources of these kinds of information, be more skeptical. That's what I would say.
And Miss Elizabeth, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I would also say to always also consider the source and like how realistic it is, which sometimes can be tough, especially with AI and people like playing jokes or doing certain things on social media. Like my mom was showing me the other day, like a video of a baby being rescued by like a puppy, but it was like almost like the puppy was walking in the water. It was like very odd. And I think sometimes it's so crazy how many people believe that. So I would say just kind of pay attention to what you're seeing, make sure that it's not AI or like a skit or something like that for youth in social media. And I would say also to do your own research. Like even sometimes when I read certain articles or hear certain things, the first thing I do honestly is go and see like if I can find a reliable source that kind of explains that further, making sure that it's an accurate news article or a new or health journal or where the source is coming from. So I always consider that. And also just saying that the fact that we also have technology can also be a positive thing. Like for example, for us at the Behavior Helpline, we're also able to, chat or text with like young people or just anyone who needs help. So I find that to be very positive. Because it's literally a real person, a clinician, like texting you back and chatting with you. We're not using like no kind of like AI or anything like that. So overall, I would say just to kind of, educate yourself, consider the source. Like, is this really AI? Are they pretending? Like, where did I hear this? And just kind of always educate yourself and do your own research and don't believe everything you see online.
Yeah.
I think the biggest takeaway is I think a lot of teens get their information from social media, whether that's Facebook, TikTok, X, reminding yourself that those are not reliable sources of information. You can get snippets of information that might be helpful, but if you're questioning it or you don't know if that's real, like this is when you should access those more reliable sources. Ask trusted adults around you. Like, do not take everything that you see on social media for face value, because everything is an algorithm and they're feeding you what you are looking into, and a lot of it is not factually based. So just remember that when you're accessing information on social media, that is not a reliable source.
And I had one quick question. It would um basically similar to what Wagner asked earlier, but kind of for everyone. Like how have you seen trends in mental health evolve over the past few years? Before COVID, during COVID, after, how it's all changed and just what you guys have noticed there, if any.
I can take it. I definitely have seen a rise in depression, anxiety, and that much I think is well known. I think the Surgeon General put out a white paper maybe 2 years ago or a year and a half ago about loneliness and about sort of youth mental health and how it's really a crisis. So the rates have been rising. There's a wonderful psychologist named, I have several books on Jen. But there's a psychologist who basically talks about how since the advent of smartphones, that's when mental health conditions really seems to have the rates of mental health issues seem to have risen. So 2013, 14 is when the spike started. And more of us, these are very addictive. Phones are super addictive and there's so much on there. It's really easy to get stuck in your phone or online in some way. It's very interesting. The trouble is it's not socially nutritious in the way that kind of meeting people in person is, having conversations on the phone would be. So we're often, it's sort of like a water everywhere, not a drop to drink. You feel very connected to people, but it's not really, it's not reinforcing in a positive way. It's kind of empty calories in a sense. So social media can be a problem. Obviously, TikTok, Instagram, maybe even Snapchat, are troublesome in terms of body image as well. They can make kids feel pretty bad about their bodies. They see everyone's best self physically and in terms of like social life. And for us adults, we have Facebook that does the same thing. There's Facebook envy, and there's the same sort of thing with Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. Perhaps you see a lot of sort of stylized or kind of people's best selves, and then you feel worse about yourself.
Yeah, what I can add to that is that, clearly there has been an increase in the incidence of several mental illnesses, and that is supported by a number of studies that have shown an increase in anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and so forth over the last decade, more so even after the pandemic began. But the other question is this a true increase, or is it increased awareness or higher rates of diagnosis? There may be possibly a true increase given the tremendous social changes that have happened, as was pointed out in the last few years with the rise of the social media. But also, I would point out the increase in liberalization of substances like marijuana across the country has contributed to an increase in prevalence of at least some major mental illnesses. And on the other hand, it is also possible that the wider use of social media and also larger use of smartphones over the course of time might have made people more aware of mental illnesses in their earliest stages. And also, there has been some thinking that the pandemic may have actually reduced social stigma to some extent about mental illness. And there may be more healthcare seeking that is happening after the beginning of the pandemic. And we actually saw that in one of our studies. We saw, first of all, that serious mental illnesses in young people had an increasing trend in Massachusetts. Secondly, we found that people with milder and milder illnesses began seeking care. So, which may be a sign that in earlier days they were not actually coming for treatment, and now they may be coming for treatment. So, which may be a positive way of interpreting the changes in mental health severity and frequency that's happening around the world. So, we need to study this better. But certainly, there may be an increase. It may be both an increased awareness and increased frequency of diagnosis. And then that last point, I want to say that certain conditions are being diagnosed more frequently, like autism spectrum disorders. The American Psychiatric Association, a few years ago, Dr. Chandra will be more knowledgeable about this. They broadened the criteria of autism to include a number of milder conditions, and brought them all together under the category autism spectrum disorders. So that basically could have contributed to an increase in the number of people being diagnosed with these conditions as well. So clearly there is a large increase in autism diagnosis around the country this time. So there are multiple factors, is what I'm saying.
I was actually thinking about TMHI and fooditude, and so I was thinking about whether how our diets can possibly influence our state of mind. For example, I've heard of a lot of studies that discuss red 40 and chemicals like that in fast food and processed food, and how such chemicals or I guess substances can get into our diets and like more frequently can then result in different conditions such as autism. Is something that I've heard of. I was wondering if any of you may have any thoughts on this or yeah.
For me, like I have a child with autism, and for me, what they told me, it was like genetics and stuff like that. And now we're having other family members. So I'm honestly not sure what the right answer is, but I'm not really sure if also if it's related to food, but I do think that makes it the condition worse. But like they were mentioning, it's very hard to track it because I was thinking the same thing. Like we are seeing a lot of diagnoses in Massachusetts of children with autism, and it's pretty much very much evident. So what was the change in that in terms of how there's that connection there? But I do think that all this new diagnosis and everything we're seeing in Massachusetts was kind of a huge influence on how the behavior helpline came. We started a roadmap for behavior health reform back in 2019, and it was put on hold until 2023 that they were able to implement it. So at least I think now Massachusetts is listening. I think there's a lot more mindfulness around it. There's more movement in terms to see what we can do. We have, 27 behavior health centers across the state, 77 behavior urgent care. People are working with private providers. People are trying to have people expand their insurances so that they can have access to that. So I think there's a lot of work that's starting. Many of the schools that I go to, they're starting mental health clubs and mental health conversation. There's more education. So I think there's a lot that's been done, but at the same time, like everyone else mentioned, there's still like a lot of work to do. And I think it's up to us to like continue kind of keeping an eye for those signs, supporting our children, supporting ourselves, and just kind of really, doing everything we can to make sure our children are successful.
Thank you. And I had one
Yeah,
more
there are
question for
many
you.
factors that have been, considered as being related to the risk for autism. The evidence for genetic factors is stronger than the evidence for factors like nutrition or other environmental factors. Maybe others, maybe Dr. Chandra has a comment on that as well.
No, I mean, you're right. We don't really know what causes autism at this time. We know that, it can show up potentially, there may be signs while a woman is pregnant, but certainly we can see it in the first few years of life. So it does seem like something that happens fairly early as opposed to something that happens, because of environmental exposures, that have accumulated as a child goes on. So definitely something very early. I do agree with you to go back to what you were saying about food. I think food colors, artificial colors, are derived from coal tars mostly, and those I think have been associated with ADHD, although the evidence is a little bit equivocal on that. Then, I mean, lead, again, not very common, in wealthier communities, but I work in Chelsea. I'm sitting in Chelsea right now. Lead was a problem in the 1980s in Chelsea, and then was more recently found to again be a problem. The Tobin Bridge has been de-leaded only partially. Some of the lead gets in the soil, and then the kids are playing in the soil, and they kind of get lead poisoning. Also, air pollution has weakly been associated with mental health problems. And then lastly, things like BPA, which I think is in plastics, PCBs, and phthalates, which are in different materials, have been associated with various mental health problems. So the environment, these are endocrine disrupting chemicals, which are problematic. Overall, sugar is not terribly good for you. It leads to fatigue. So I think in general, eating a lot of foods with added sugar is a problem. A lot of the artificial sweeteners aren't really good for you either. I think like Fooditude points out, eating healthy foods, what we know to be healthy, vegetables, fruits, beans, yogurt, if you're not vegan, are all really good foods for you.
I had one question for Ms. Frias. We've kind of talked about today how a lot of high schoolers and teens, they get academic pressure, and we've seen on social media, like seeing other people live really, I guess, um, extravagant lives is what we're exposed to and makes us feel worse about ourselves. I was wondering if there are any other kind of trends you noticed that add stress or anxiety to the lives of teens, um, or if there are any things that are very common to hear about that you don't really see as much, that maybe surprise you. Like for me personally, I don't see a lot of physical bullying, but I've also seen other people suffer from like oral bullying, like being called names and stuff like that. And I was wondering if what else you think is a big deal in school that we should be more mindful of.
I think that's a great question. I think that there are a lot of different factors that impact people individually. I think the big, like, major trends that we're seeing are likely related to social media and the stigma around mental health. But I think when we think about the environment that students are in, whether they feel welcomed in that environment, whether they have people around them that they feel like they can relate to, is something that's super common that can cause stress for students if they don't feel like they're in a community that is accepting of them, or that they have other people around them that maybe look like them, can be difficult to navigate. I think it can boil down to family dynamics. It can be maybe they don't have friends within the school that they can connect with. I think there's lots of different things to consider. Just being mindful of everyone around you. And I know that it's said often, but like, lead with kindness to everyone that you meet, because you truly never know what's going on for an individual when they're at home, when they're outside of the school setting. So regardless of how someone acts, always trying to meet someone with kindness and compassion at the end of the day, in my opinion, is what's going to help lead us in a trend of kindness all around, and reducing the stigma that we're seeing. So I think it's a loaded question. It's hard to give specific examples of why others struggle with mental health, because really, when it boils down to it, it's a chemical imbalance. Someone can live a perfect life on paper, but for whatever reason, there's an imbalance within them that makes it difficult to navigate life. So I don't think that there is necessarily a specific thing to kind of boil it down to. It's different for every person.
Thank you.
We have two more questions from our youth brigade. But if I can just step in quickly, kids, I wanted to, first of all, um, applaud all our youth brigade members for putting together this panel amazingly. And also wanted to thank our panelists for great answers and insights, and continuously sharing resources. And on that note, I wanted to share this website that our youth brigade have created for Teen Mental Health Initiative, and wanted to kind of just bring it to everyone's notice. And I'll share the link in the chat, but just if you can continue to kind of share resources, as you can see, Dr. Chandra Clay Center for Young Healthy Minds is shared here. And this is a TMHI website, as you can see, and it's under resources. And these have all been put together by our Youth Brigade members. So you can see there are a bunch of resources here. So if you can continue to share, maybe even via email, because I think one of the big challenges is how to connect the resources to the people who need it. Because the level of awareness is very low. So on that note, I want to pass it back to Drishti and Rhea to ask their questions, and then we'll open it up to the attendees. And you can raise your hand and we'll pick your questions, or you can put the questions in the chat and we'll take it from there. Go ahead, Drishti.
All right, thank you. My question is, have you witnessed a shift in how patients and family talk about mental illness in like the recent years?
You want to repeat that question again, Drishti, just slowly?
Yeah, got it. My question was, have you guys like witnessed a shift in how like patients and families talk about mental illness in like the recent years? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse?
I would say, like Dr. Keshavan said, I think there's been more awareness. Part of it is because more students have struggled, so it's just more common. Whether it's been, I think as kids have struggled more, more kids have struggled. Schools have become more aware. Parents have been more aware. There are more presentations like this. The first presentation I went to on South Asian mental health was in 2014. I'd never seen anything like that. I was really excited. I had to drive to Queens for it, but now they're fairly common. And this Lexington Red Flags and Resources I shared that was put together right around 2014, I think, too. So the awareness, I think really has started to rise. And, parents may be a bit more amenable to having their kids, go for treatment because, the stigma may have been lessened over time by, all of this discussion. So I think people are starting to talk about it quite a bit. I went to a book talk on this book. Again, our audience is mostly Indian American. So what will people say? Log kya kahenge? Sahaj Kaur Kohli, and that was, I think, in the fall. And she started I think a website called Brown Girl Therapy. And it's an excellent book.
What I would add is that, there has been a study recently, a very large study that was published in this prestigious journal, JAMA, Psychiatry, which showed that stigma in mental illness in the United States has been declining for most disorders over the last 20 years, with the exception of some illnesses like schizophrenia. Why that is the case is hard to understand. It may be that, stigma also is determined by how treatable a given mental illness is, and conditions which are, increasingly amenable to treatments that work for them tend to get, less stigmatized. Conditions where the medical science itself is still struggling in terms of finding good treatments. And there are conditions that that psychiatry and medicine still have challenges with of discovering causes and coming up with treatments. Stigma may go down a little bit slower in those populations, and that may be the case with conditions like schizophrenia and Alzheimer's disease and so on. We still have a lot of work to do.
Okay, I have a question. So what do you recommend to people struggling with mental health who don't have proper access to mental health resources?
I think for me at the behavior helpline, I would say to call, chat, or text us, with any questions or concerns that you have. We're here to help. This is a free clinical resource from Massachusetts. It's paid by taxpayer dollars. Use it. We have behavioral health centers. We have therapy. We can help with anything from, telehealth, inpatient, family counseling. You don't have to be in a crisis. And even if you feel like you're going through a mental health crisis, you can also call the helpline versus going to the emergency room and sitting there for 20 hours just to be told like, okay, you have to be seen by a psychiatrist, and we don't do that here. So I think really researching wherever you live, the resources that are available to you and to your community, and not giving up and talking to like a trusted adults about some things that you're experiencing so that maybe they can help you navigate, that would be helpful. At the helpline, we have young people as young as 12 and 13-year-old called, and we speak to their caregivers and their guardians and their parents and really try to support them through resources. And if you're going through something, also speak to your parents and also research what your feelings, and like really advocate for yourself. I think that's really the only way to move forward. Not to give up and know that help is there, and to really seek out help when needed.
Yeah, no, what I would add is there is now a national helpline called the 988. It's just like 911, but for mental health. And it's there available in all the 51 states.
I was also going to mention the 988 hotline. And then, of course, for all of the teens on the call and parents who might also be here, like schools have so many resources that they can connect students and families with, or even just checking in with your school counselor or school psychologist within your building. Like they have a lot of supports that they can help you with in terms of thinking about coping strategies and different ways to navigate any of the struggles that you're going through. And if it's beyond the scope of a school, they can connect you with some of these agencies within the community that might be of more assistance.
Thank you all so much for your responses. As Pratibha Shah previously mentioned, we would like to now open this Q&A discussion to the rest of our audience. I encourage you to ask these questions. We have such a valuable panel of speakers here today. And so, yeah, you could ask anything. You could also ask about their careers, for example, if maybe psychiatry is a career that you want to go into. So feel free to ask your questions. And yeah.
Think people are quite digesting and reflecting on everything. So I'll ask one question in the meantime as people are beginning to think about what they would like to ask. We have Mona here. Mona, if you have any questions, but I have two questions. One is, I'm a big fan of systemic thinking. So what can be a good systemic approach to this? Because the way I'm looking at it, as someone in the field, as a consumer, as a parent, is that there are different efforts, but something that is looking at all the complete scenario. Because if you think about parents, you have um, parents who are also maybe suffering, and parents who are also probably unaware they are struggling. Then they have youth who are struggling and they are unaware that their youth are struggling, because mental health issues can present in so many different ways. Somebody just being lazy, for example, and that's not easily recognizable. And in nuclear families where there's not enough together time to be observing things, how can we get this at a school level where there are educational sessions for parents as well, so that between the school and the home, things are not getting missed out? Because often they get detected much, or they get diagnosed much later in life, and by that time a lot of damage has happened, a lot of harm has occurred. So is there any systemic view to this? And my other question, and anybody can take this, is that with the initiative that we are doing on whatever scale we are doing, how can you guide us to try and expand this? Because again, people have time for entertainment, for parties, but for something free and valuable like this, people find it difficult to find time. So how do we get it? Get this conversation going? What are some of the suggestions you have for us as an initiative to help with this whole scenario? Anybody can please take up.
It's a broad question. I mean, I would say in terms of the systemic part, I mean, there really isn't a one size fits all. I mean, you have kids who have a wide variety of struggles caused by a wide variety there are lots of reasons for the struggles. If a child is facing discrimination in school, then what to do about that is different than if a child has more like a biological depression that runs in the family, which is different than a child is just was traumatized and something really horrible has happened. How do you deal with the perpetrator, that sort of thing. So I mean, there really isn't one thing, but I mean, certainly I think discussions like this are useful because they can bust myths, they can dispel myths and kind of give people facts and truths. And Mona Roy had written me privately asking this question: what can communities and affinity groups and community leaders do to destigmatize discussion about mental health struggles? I think it's just that. I think it's just open things up, just in ever widening circles, get more and more people involved and have people understand, the real struggles that others are facing, and that it's not laziness. It's not trying, often parents will say, a child is not trying hard enough and they're doing badly academically. That's why they're depressed, when it actually maybe the kid is depressed and that's why they're not doing well academically. So, there's often a belief, again, parents, who are raised in India may feel like you just have to eat well, sleep well, everything will be fine. I've struggled with depression, or I've been sad at times. You'll get over it. Not recognizing perhaps that depression is much more serious than just, occasional bouts of sadness. Same with anxiety. A child is suffering with terrible anxiety, and a parent may say, if I've been stressed before, don't worry, it will be over, but it does not resolve. So I think the education part is important, having parents recognize that there are some serious conditions that we see here, which they may not have experienced themselves or seen back home in India, that the rates of mental illness are just higher here. It's not anyone's fault, but they have to recognize that they have to perhaps, address and perhaps treat their child's illnesses and not sort of hope they will just go away. But again, I don't think there's anything systemic, just more of these conversations. And the more people struggle, the more conversations are had. So things are trending upwards in that respect.
Yeah, no, I would add that, the question is a very important one. Mental health care in this country is extremely fragmented. There cannot be simple solutions. There cannot be bandages for this. There's got to be a more systematic solution. And that requires, the will of the population, the leaders of the population. And say, I try to think of this as the 5 A's that you want to think about healing the mental health problem in this country. Number one is increasing awareness. That is a matter of public education and in high schools, colleges, and so on, and the general population. Number two is access, making access for mental health care being made available universally. And of course, technology can do that. There are so many options of digital healthcare, virtual healthcare, and they may be making the ability to disseminate care in a much broader way than was previously possible. The third A is ensuring that individuals get, affordable care. That again is a big problem because of the insurance problems with parity, and simply social problems of being unable to afford things. And then the fourth one is appropriate care and adequate care. Quite often it is these patients come in and you see them for 15-minute med checks and, not enough attention given to the complexities of these conditions. And that's a big problem as well. And finally, I think adequate, advocacy. I think family members and individuals with illnesses, as well as providers and policymakers, they all have to speak up on mental health so that those who make decisions as to where the resources go in this country, mental health has to be made a priority. And that requires advocacy. So those are the 5 things that I would say.
I think those are all great recommendations. In terms of the lens of like what can schools do, I think we're seeing a lot of schools roll out these regular mental health screeners, which I would like to see across all school districts. And I think a lot of schools in Massachusetts are beginning to implement these things. So providing students with mental health screeners to ensure that we're identifying any students who might be struggling with mental health. In terms of like what can parents do who might also be experiencing mental health struggles? When we think about children and teenagers, they tend not to listen, they observe, so they see what's around them, right? So if you're a parent who's struggling with mental health, of course you need to have some layer of, things that you keep to yourself, but being open with your child when maybe you are stressed about a presentation at work the next day and kind of talking that through with them and showing them how you cope with things that stress you out can help them think about the presentation that they have in school, and they think about, oh, my mom was also stressed about this and these are some things that she did. Like, we're these walking examples for teenagers and kids. So whatever we can do to represent different ways for them to navigate things in their life, I think is super helpful. And as parents, we want to protect our kids and help them as much as possible. It's okay to see our kid struggle a little bit. It's okay to see our kid not pass every test that they take. Like, these are normal stressors that we're going to experience in life. And sometimes experiencing failure, experiencing things that maybe don't work out exactly as planned are ways that our children and our teens can develop strategies moving forward in life. Like, it's good to experience things that don't always go our way. So as much as we want to protect, we also want to expose as many learning experiences as possible. So I think it's good as parents to keep those things in mind. Like, it's okay to have open conversations with your kids about stressors and things that you do that make you feel good, and show your kids that you're living a healthy life. You're going on walks, you're taking care of yourself, you're hanging out with friends, you're doing all of these things that make you feel good, and they hopefully encourage your child to do those same things that make them feel good.
And for us at the Behavior Helpline, we have like a focus on health equity. So the Behavior Helpline is available in over 200 languages. It's insurance blind. It's really a clinician walking you through the triage process. We use the Columbia risk assessment to kind of figure out how things are. We make recommendation. We can do, like third-party kind of warm handoff to the kind of community behavior health centers or treatment. So all those services, are available to everyone. But just like everybody just said, kind of educating yourself on the resources that are there, that are available, I think is the first step, and just kind of advocating for your child, keeping an eye on them, and, just seeing what you can do to help them.
Hi, this is Nija. I have a couple of questions if it's a good time.
Sure. And then we also have a question in the chat. Vakmi, you can read that after this one. And then probably we'll do our thank you note.
Okay. Just a couple of one observation I have listening to Sarah, and I think the 2 psychiatrists we have is the mental illness. It's almost like from the time when you're doing the lagging indicators of all the tests in schools, from it being a psychological issue to when it actually manifests as a mental illness, suddenly becomes a biological issue as doctors see it. That's how I'm seeing it. And I think, and so this question may be, Sarah, for you. Is there anything in school, if you're looking at from psychological issue and you're saying before it becomes a biological issue, we could have done something to guide the kids to to have better ways of coping things. So rather than those tests, which almost are at the end, do you have a problem or not? Is there any plan in place or anything that you are doing to say, is this child more likely to get there or not? Do we have anything that's bringing into the systems in schools?
So something that I've seen schools implementing and something that the school that I work at has, and I think majority of schools in Massachusetts are starting to implement, is a social emotional curriculum in some way. And that's typically starting at early education and working its way up. So we regularly within the high school that I work at have teachers at what we call a tier 1 level, so accessible to all students, are offering social emotional curriculums to start these conversations at a really young age. So even at kindergarten level, beginning to open up conversations about how we can regulate our emotions, how we can deal with these big emotions that everyone experiences. So I do think that we're doing our best to provide as much education ahead of time, but then also having those screeners to catch the students that maybe that tier 1 support wasn't enough. So maybe they need what we would then refer to as like a tier 2 or tier 3 level of support. So we're doing our best to identify people as early as possible and to provide students with those skills as early as possible. And then for the students who maybe that level of support isn't enough, then we'll kind of refer them to those higher tiers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to add, and just one other point is that pediatricians can be sort of a parent's best friend. Pediatricians are every year when they do a well child check are screening for a lot of conditions and problems. And of course, I think like Dr. Frias said, teachers and other school officials will let you know if they're concerned about your child in some way. Progress reports will say something. They may call home and be like a little bit worried. Your child seems anxious or is struggling socially, or it may just show up in whatever they write. So I think just paying attention. There are often signs.
Thank you so much. We have a question from Mona in the chat. I think it's directly to me, so I'll read it. How does cultural competency intersect with supporting students and youth as well as families? And what can the profession do as a whole to work towards serving diverse populations?
So I will say this country has a race problem. This country, we're seeing it really kind of out in the open if it wasn't already. Since the pandemic, we've really seen it, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and everything that's happened since the recent election. So, you have forces that are working towards greater acceptance and inclusion of people who are different than the dominant group, and then you have forces who are working against them. So, as much as possible, having tough conversations and holding events like this. But Mona is the one who knows. She's the one that really does the fighting, and it's not an easy fight. To raise awareness about various issues, including racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination, neurodiversity. So kudos to her for the fighting that she does. But it's an uphill battle, no question.
I would add, vote your conscience, so that you have the right people in power, in positions of power, to place mental health priority where it should be.
Okay.
Thank you
Bhakti?
so much. I think after this panel, I have to think about everything and sort of be introspective. And so overall, I would like to thank you all so much for joining us today for the Mind Matters Mental Health panel. We are so incredibly grateful for our panelists, Dr. Chandra, Dr. Keshavan, Ms. Frias, and Ms. Frontaan, for sharing their time, experiences, and powerful insights with us. One of the most meaningful parts of today's event was the variety of perspectives that we were able to hear. From psychiatry and school counseling to public health and community outreach, each panel brought an equal lens to the conversation. Together, these perspectives created a nuanced and complex view of teen mental health, highlighting just how deeply personal, cultural, and multifaceted this topic really is. This diversity of thought helped us understand the bigger picture, and we're so grateful to have that. Today's conversation reminded us that mental health is just as important as physical health, and seeking help is a sign of strength and not weakness. By showing up and being part of the discussion, we're already helping break the stigma and build a culture of empathy, openness, and support. On behalf of the Holistic Health Alliance Youth Brigade and Teen Mental Health Initiative, I encourage each one of you to keep these conversations going in your schools, families, and communities. If today's panel inspired you, please consider joining our Youth Brigade and begin becoming a part of a growing movement for mental health and advocacy. Before we wrap up, 2 quick things. Tomorrow, I will be sending out a Google Form survey to everyone who attended, and please take a minute to fill it out, and it'll help us understand what you learned and how we can keep continuing and improving. And so we'll also be sharing key statistics and takeaways from the survey on our social media, so make sure you follow us and stay engaged. And finally, I invite everyone to take a moment to reflect and think about a takeaway of something you appreciated about today's event in the Zoom chat. We'd love to hear what resonated with you. Overall, thank you once again, and let's continue to support each other and speak up for mental health because every mind matters.
And before we conclude, can we have one last concluding thought from all the panelists? Just a remark before we wrap up.
Okay, what kind of wisdom to share? I think listen to your kids. So to parents, listen to your kids. If you are concerned about them, ask them, should you be concerned? And do listen to their teachers, listen to their peers, if someone is sharing that they are worried about your child. That's one thing. And then keep lines of communication open. If your child is saying, I'm really stressed, I have 5 AP classes and all of these projects, help your child de-stress. If we were working really, really hard, we were working 60, 70, 80 hours a week as adults, we would be stressed too. Kids may have a lot on their plates and parents can help them. So try not to put too much pressure and try to support. You know what your child is capable of, and certainly it's good to push the child towards their capabilities and to achieve what they can. But you also want to manage their stress level and their workload.
Yeah, what I would say is
sorry.
following up on what I said earlier, a majority of mental illnesses, emotional difficulties begin in teenage years or earlier. But there is a positive side to that, and that is that, earlier you understand and try to intervene, the better it's going to be in the longer run. And so this is an opportunity for prevention and early intervention. And mental health disorders are highly treatable. You just need early recognition and appropriate care from all concerned. And often it takes a village to get a teenager moving in the right direction and getting towards better health.
I guess for me, what I want to add is that mental health is healthcare, and to always take care of yourself and try to take care of others. If you're going through a rough time, please reach out, to different systems that can support you. Take care of yourself, make time to go on walks or listen to music or just do things that make you feel good. It's not all about just working in schools and stuff like that. And, you know, in order to show up for other people, we have to show up for ourselves. So I would say to take care of yourself, keep an eye on yourself and when things don't feel good, and then, you know, kind of adjust accordingly so that you're able to function and be able to take care of yourself and your families.
I think my final kind of statement would be to everyone who's part of this call, we're all working towards breaking the stigma around mental health. Like if you're on this call, you're making a step to do that, which is awesome. So continue to have conversations around mental health. If you're struggling yourself or if you feel like your child is struggling, connect with the resources around you, whether that's school resources, community resources. If you're a student at school and you have a friend that you think is struggling, reach out to a trusted adult, get help, and continue to break down, you know, the stigma that's surrounding mental health. Have conversations and continue to advocate.
Thank you so much for such powerful takeaways, especially prioritizing mental health and mental health ASAP. Love that. Just so you all know, this talk will be going on our YouTube channel, which is a little young in its lifespan. It's not very old. And I'll send the link to the YouTube video to all the speakers as well. Please feel free to disseminate because a lot of important conversation has happened today. Please continue to encourage people to subscribe to the YouTube channel because you can see so many youth are getting engaged with this important conversation. And when they are engaging in this kind of a conversation now, definitely they will be looking at all of these things very differently as young adults. So, well, thank you again. And Vagmi, over to you to give the final concluding remark.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of your takeaways today. I feel like today was such a valuable panel because I got to hear about a topic that I'm passionate about, but in so many perspectives. And I think this really helps me kind of come up with a really nuanced and complex view on mental health more than I had before. And thank you so much for being here today. This means a lot to me and for all of us, obviously, as we care so much about our mental health, teens' mental health. These are really important topics for not only teens, but also adults. Like, we should all seek out resources and we should all take care of ourselves. I found, Miss Frontaan, when you said that we need to show up for ourselves, I think that is so important. I think that self-care is so important, and I think that putting yourself first and then putting yourself and giving yourself that value kind of allows us to have the ability to then go and help others do the same thing. And I think that's a really important takeaway for me personally today. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
All volunteers, please stay back.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.